Hi, and welcome to the Raw Heart and Soul podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Carroll, and today with me I have a special guest, Chris Jones. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Tanya. Great to be here.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So the podcast is about finding out and seeing how people came to live their soul purpose, and if they think they're living their soul purpose, and what that means to them and how they understand that. So I think we've known each other for about 12 years, haven't we? On and off through the program?
Yes, I think we've sort of floated around in similar circles for quite a while now.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to become a personal trainer and owning the business? Because you own the business in Sydney, Primal Movement, and you've owned that for 15 years. But before that, you've mentioned that you were an accountant in Wales?
Yes, so I grew up in the UK and did a business university degree after leaving school, and then went on and did my accountancy exams for another 4 years in London. But I always had coming to Australia as a big plan, because I travelled here as a backpacker and thought, oh, that'll be a really cool place to live. So I always had that ambition to get out here, which I did in 2003. I got a job with an accountancy firm in Sydney, and I was probably just over a year into that, and my dad had cancer, and I ended up going back to the UK for about 9 months, and Dad passed away. Meanwhile, fairly soon after I got to Sydney, I met Nikki, who's now my wife, and she was kind of like me, outdoor and sporty and into that side of things. So initially we sort of jumped into the personal training space for purely personal reasons of, we wanted to be more active. Initially, there wasn't a lot of thought, certainly from me, about helping other people. Which is the actual truth.
It happens like that. It's a lifestyle choice, and I know that it was that was one of my considerations as well when I went into it too. It's like, how can I do a job that I can still train every day?
Yeah, that's right. And I remember I lived on the front in Manly when I moved here, which is pretty sensational when you move over from the UK, where it's fairly drizzly in London. And there was a friend of mine who he took me for some personal training sessions, and I used to see him staying on the beach when I was heading off into the city in a suit. And I just thought, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. He can do that for a job. So that was my first inspiration, really, to jump into personal training.
Did you play sport as a child? Like, did you play rugby in Wales?
Yeah, I played a lot of team sports, particularly rugby and cricket were the main winter and summer sports.
Cool.
And went to a very sport-minded school, which I loved. It was a boarding school, so we were there playing sports with mates all day, every day. So
how did Primal Movement come about? Did you and Nikki just open that straight up after becoming like a personal trainer?
We did our Cert 3 and 4 exams, and then we had to go and we had to get sort of a bit of experience with people. And Nikki had gone up to Fitness First in DY, just to get, I think it was just getting her hours up for passing her Cert 4. Yeah. And then she came back and said, oh, you got to go and chat to these guys, who happened to be a couple of Czech guys. And I was always, following this guy I'd seen on Manly Beach, thinking, right, I want to be outside in the sun on the beach, running about. But I did that for about 2 days, and I thought, oh, this isn't going to last very long. I'm going to get bored. So I went in, and a chap called Mike Battaglia, he drew me a picture of the Paul's sinks that are in the start of Eat, Move and Be Healthy. And we started chatting about it, and I was like, this is it. I'm into it. So then I went to Fitness First for about 4 years, and we had about six or so of us going through the Chek program, which was really a good support network. We all sort of did it together. And then 3 of us wanted to change the environment away from a commercial gym and set up our own place where we could sort of teach more of the Chek principles and, have a better space for the holistic lifestyle coaching. And and that's how it started. And
you're still there today?
Yeah, we've moved premises once. But yeah, Cameron Ashley, he's still working with me at Primal, and we've now got Donald Carr and Kathy Carr and a few others. Yeah, it's good.
What took you into accountancy in the first place?
I knew you were going to ask that. Well, I think one, I was quite good at maths, and I wasn't particularly good at anything else. It was a natural fit, that's true. But I sort of grew up with a fairly narrow mindset of what I could do. I didn't give it a lot of broad thought, and it was kind of, well, are you going to be a lawyer, an accountant, a banker, a doctor? There was probably, you know, half a dozen things that I considered. And I was not clever enough to be a doctor, and I was quite good at maths. So that was kind of, some of it was how I sort of got rid of the, you know, the, what are they called? Not recruitment guys, but the careers officers in school.
To get them off that.
I could tell them I was going to be an accountant. My dad was an accountant.
Right.
So that was a 2-minute consultation, and I didn't get any hassle.
Yeah.
And then I think I got out of university, and I hadn't really done a lot of work, and I thought, well, actually, I need to knuckle down to something and build a career, which is what I did then in London.
Has that to running the business now?
Is it useful, sorry?
Yeah, has that accountancy degree been useful throughout having Primal Movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a part of me that says, oh, what a waste of time. I spent 8 years in a suit in the city. But actually, yeah, you've got to, if you're going to run a business, you have to understand the numbers. And, you know, I did get some very valuable experience from it.
So when I mention the words soul purpose, what does that bring up for you?
Probably living the way I want to live and am meant to live, and kind of like my true essence, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's probably it.
Are you living that way in terms of what you're doing with Primal Movement? Do you think, like, when I think about soul purpose, I think about something that drives you and that you can't let go of, that you have to do, like it's an itch that you can't scratch until you've done it. Is that what personal training is for you, and coaching?
I think so. I mean, I dare say things have moved a little bit. I mean, you know, having the kids, I've got an 8 and a 3-year-old. That's become, you know, an even greater thing. And Primal, you know, is a vehicle for me to create wealth and stability and financial security in the family. So there's that element sort of attached onto it these days, as opposed to me fulfilling the type of job I want and now getting more fulfillment from helping other people. Yeah, it's probably become a bit sort of multi-stranded, actually.
Yeah, I don't think I think people can have multiple soul purposes throughout their life and throughout their journey as well. Sometimes I think you have to do a few different things before that becomes really apparent.
Yeah. I mean,
it takes people a long time. Sometimes I've got clients who are 65 and 70 who still don't really know what their soul purpose was.
Yeah. Well, I remember doing Paul Chek's 3-day PPS course on finding your legacy.
Yes.
And Nikki and I Nikki was a graphic designer before, and we had both shifted, you know, much closer to our soul purpose. So when it came to do that course, it was quite fun for us, because it just nailed on that we were doing the right thing. Whereas a lot of people were having, you know, huge breakdowns, and there were tears everywhere. And, you know, that was an interesting 3 days, because we'd probably just gone through that stage a couple of years ago of changing everything. So that was interesting.
How did your perspective change when you had the children? So Paxton, you said, is 8?
Paxton's 8, yes. Indigo 3.5.
Yeah.
Or. So
how did that, because I know when I had children, I had my first 2 children before I became a personal trainer. And I was 23 when I had Kelvin and 25 when I had Timothy. So quite young, and really, I'm really glad I had them when I did, but really didn't know what I was going to do with the rest of my life except be a mother, which can be someone's entire soul purpose. But I knew that it wasn't mine eventually. And I think life circumstances, my first husband had cancer and then passed away as a result of that cancer. And I think Timothy was like 6 years old when that happened, and Kelvin was 7. So I think my soul purpose changed after I'd had the kids, and then probably more so even when I had my last child, Eden. Like did having the children change that perspective for you?
Well, I think that one thing that's quite useful to say is that we sort of changed path before we had kids and before we had a mortgage.
Yeah.
Which I'm into the soul purpose, but there was a financial burden that we didn't have at that point, and responsibility. Yeah. So that made a transition. I mean, Nikki and I got into the personal training thing, and we literally said, if we can pay the bills for 6 months, we're in.
Yeah.
You know, and that was 2006, I think, so 14 years ago. I guess then when we had the kids, I probably felt that my sole purpose shifted more to a father's perceived role of, you know, supporting the family financially as much as anything. And also that's have a bit of a grounding force. Whereas I think the other side of the coin was that what we learned, particularly through the Chek program, on how to be healthy and how to, you know, raise healthy children, that just drove straight in, that we were able to, we knew about the importance of breastfeeding and the natural birth and you know, what we could feed the kids and a balanced lifestyle and all the, you know, all the things of just looking after yourself and raising children. So that just pushed that part of the sole purpose, you know, give it even more credence, really.
Are you going to stay in Sydney? Like, does that, because I know you mentioned that you enjoy the gardening, is that a long-term thing, or do you want to take them somewhere that's a little bit, for me, Sydney is very congested, and like when you mentioned that you're into the gardening, explain to me where you want to go with that. Like, do you have a bigger, a different purpose to buy property and expand on that? Or are you happy where you're doing what you're doing, where you're doing it?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky. We've got quite a big, I mean, for Sydney, we've got 900 and something square meters at home. We live on the top of the northern beaches. So we're in, if you looked out in my window here, there's trees everywhere. It's great. And, you know, it's pretty open. Yeah. And we've only got a little cottage on quite a big plot. So the garden is quite a handful here. Yeah. So at the moment, we're happy in Sydney, and we're happy with, we've got a great Steiner school up the road that Paxton goes to. And, you know, we've got a good support network around. We've got some cousins here because we've moved away from our closest family. Yeah. So we've got a set of cousins here, which is really good. So yeah, we're pretty happy at the moment. Would we buy a big property? I don't know. But yeah, I'm more of a hobby gardener than a serious one. Well, I love spending hours in the garden, but yeah, it's a little part.
Awesome. Just part of your joy.
Yeah, and it's part of my routine now, which I love.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you about your accident, because that's a big part of what I wanted to talk to you about as well. So can you explain what happened for us and when that was? That was, you said, almost 3 years ago now?
Yeah, that was the 20th of December, 2017.
Before Christmas.
Before Christmas. So we for the previous couple of years, we had gone as a family up to my lakes, pretty close to where we do the HLC. We had an HLC 2 up there. So we were camping at the top of my lakes, and the long and the short of it was that some strong winds came through. We had a little sailboat that I went to move out of the water that evening, and heard a noise, turned around, and bang, I was under a tree, quite a large one.
A big tree.
A big tree, yeah. Where I stayed for the next 2 hours.
Yeah. You very simplified that down. Like, it was a big tree. Like, there was a point in time where, or was there a point in time for you? Because I know from the outside looking in, it looked like a life and death situation from the way it was explained to us, or the way you explained it online, and the way it came through from friends as well, from Kathy and Donald when I heard about it, that it was like, when you say the tree fell on you, it fell across your pelvis?
Yeah, so if you imagine I was sort of in a star sort of position, I was lying right across my lower back. So it didn't impact any of my lumbar vertebrae, but it just shattered my pelvis.
And your SIJ?
Yes, everything was just in like a jigsaw puzzle to the pelvis there. And my bladder got pulled apart from my urethra. So it was quite a bit of internal bleeding and things. But my legs, my femurs weren't impacted. It was just all pelvis.
In some ways, I think it's incredibly lucky that you were face down rather than supine.
Yeah, and if you look at there's actually video footage of the whole thing, and still shots, but what I will say is that apart from the tree falling on me, which was quite bad luck, everything else, bar nothing, was very lucky. Yeah. So there's a very small little crook in the trunk that just sort of gave me enough space to stay in there. And you know, just all these little 1%ers helped me out. But yeah, it was life or death, for sure.
What were you thinking when you were under there for the 2 hours?
Well, I thought this could be the end of me.
Right.
That was one of my initial thoughts. Is this the end? Is it, you know, is that it? And then I kind of just sort of, I don't know if you'd call it a meditation, but I definitely went into just a breathing routine.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked before to people about how I just counted to 10 repeatedly. I've given myself this sort of put myself in this little trance, which is what I used to do on the Concept 2 rowing machine when things got sticky.
Yeah.
So I just kind of went inside, and I just knew that I had to breathe, and that was it. I mean, I was getting squished, so I was vomiting, and you know, it was fairly compressed. But I just got into this breathing routine of 10 breaths, start again, 10 breaths, start again. And yeah, I was outwardly quite chilled, I think, considering what was happening.
You didn't panic on the inside, like did you?
I was terrified on the inside, yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't really register that until I worked with a psychologist, and she said the word terror, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's how I felt. It was pure terror.
Yeah.
So I just had to keep going back to this breath. And I remember somebody came and brought me a pillow or a cushion or something to support my head, and they broke my sequence.
Yeah.
Like, I really got the shits. I don't want it. I was just so present with the breath. It was just unbelievable.
Would you say that was your anchor? Like, if I could make it through this 10 seconds, I can make it through the next 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I, in hindsight, having talked about it many times, I do think there was an element that I played a lot of sport, and the final whistle comes. It doesn't matter if you're getting beating up in a match or whatever. You know, it's an 80-minute game and it finishes and you go and have a shower. It doesn't matter how horrific it is.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't give any thought at all to what would happen after. I thought, right, as soon as I get this tree off me, that's it. That's the end of the game.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to get to. And then, you know, I guess knowing that the emergency services were on the way, and then they would take over, I just didn't get involved in thinking about that. It was just, right, just stay with it now. I kind of knew that if I sort of stopped being conscious, I was probably gone. Right. So I just sort of just keep breathing. Don't think about anything else. Just keep breathing.
Did you feel pain in that moment, or did you feel pain during that time, or could you push that away because you were just concentrating on that breathing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was the compression, that I was getting squeezed, and that was pretty full on. I mean, luckily there were some really good people at the campsite who'd rigged up some ropes, and they had boards and things underneath the tree, just trying to relieve it a little bit, which I'm quite sure was one of the 1%, probably more than the 1% that saved me. So I think they probably within 20 or 30 minutes got some pressure off, and then a little while later they got a bit more off, which made it much worse.
I was going to say, because isn't there a threat of a crush injury? So once you lift that off, then the poisons can...
That's it. That's the extent of my knowledge from first aid training, which we do every year. And I just instinctively knew that was bad. It was that was excruciating. So I got them to put it back down on me.
Right.
And then later on, you know, probably an hour and a half in, the fireys got there. I think they were the first. They were certainly there before the ambos, but they couldn't do anything because the ambos had to administer medical drugs first. Otherwise, I would have died of the toxic shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for people who aren't listening here in Australia, that time frame seems incredibly long from when the accident happened to an hour and a half later for the fires to get there. But Mile Shores and Mile Lakes is quite remote. Yeah,
that's right. They couldn't get a helicopter in because of the winds.
Right.
So they had to drive in, which is, you know, it's a dirt road into it. And then once they got me in the ambulance, there was another hour and a half down to Newcastle Hospital.
I'm guessing you would have had some pretty serious drugs by that stage. So that part of the trip would be, can you remember any of that, getting down?
Oh, yeah, I've got a very loose kind of memory. And I think I pretty much checked out as we hit the hospital.
Yeah.
They stopped on the highway to give me a couple of litres of blood. The team from Newcastle came up from the hospital and they met with us on the way down, and then they did put a bit of blood into me, which again, there's another 1% that they say, you know, to save me. But then when I got to Newcastle, they put me straight into the operating theatre, because they'd done all of their prep and assessment work beforehand, and they said to Nikki, well, we just don't know if he's going to make it. So she was then left on her own. Luckily, the people at the campsite looked after the kids. Indigo was only 1 at the time.
Yeah.
So that must have, I mean, I just cannot imagine how Nick was, you know, how she covered that.
Right.
So she was left on her own then in the hospital. Luckily, one of the nurses, who was amazing, just sort of sat with her for a fair bit of the night. Yeah, she didn't really know what was going to happen.
How long before you were out of surgery?
They certainly did 1 9-hour surgery. It was sort of, I think it was there may have been 3 surgeons working, sort of tag teaming, and then I think they knocked me out for 3 days and put me in a coma. Which time I'm assuming I was stable. And then I think I woke up on the 3rd day.
What was the first memory, or what was the first thought when you woke up? Do you remember that?
Not really, but I do. The first thing I remember is I didn't know if it was day or night. I was just completely confused. And because the ICU where I was, I mean, there were just nurses who were just unbelievable, just looking after you non-stop. The care was just incredible. But the lights were on, and I had this feeling that it was nighttime. And I just couldn't, for the life of me, work it out. I mean, I was on all sorts of, like, the world's biggest cocktail of drugs. But yeah, I was just confused. I was like, what? It's nighttime and the lights are on. What's happening? Yeah.
When did you start the rehab process? Did that start straight away, or was that weeks later?
We did some very light things. I was in Newcastle Hospital for best part of 2 months, I think, and there were ongoing surgeries. So up to the day before I left, I think, bladder surgeries, and they had to fixate my pelvis and then do all sorts of things. So I think one of the physios there had me doing some, there was a track, sort of like a bike machine that would be lowered onto my bed, and I would be passive, and it would move me through a very small range of motion. But there were all sorts of little steps along the way. So, for example, when I first time I got out of bed, they had to lift me up in a cargo net, and then like dump me into this super padded wheelchair. Yeah. And then, you know, then I had to learn how to transition from the bed. And luckily, my upper body strength was really good. Yeah. Transition from the bed, kind of like a moving tricep dip into a wheelchair, one hand hanging off a chin-up bar. So I guess that was the start of it.
Did you ever think you wouldn't walk again? Was that ever a thought that came into your mind, or was it ever suggested that it might not happen?
They just said that they didn't know with the nerve damage. They just did not know if I would get 100% recovery or no recovery.
What did you do?
I always thought I would. Yeah. I wasn't really planning on not. Yeah. Yeah.
In that process?
Pardon?
Do you think having that faith in yourself helped you through the process, like not even considering that you wouldn't?
Yeah, pretty much. And you know, and certainly until I tried everything, I wasn't going to entertain that idea. I mean, I've got some good videos of the first time I did certain things, because my left leg was completely paralyzed. I couldn't feel anything or move anything. My right leg was from the knee down. And then I think there was one video that I first extended my knee, and I was like a one rep max knee extension, and I moved it about 6 inches, and like I was always backing myself to try as hard as I possibly could. Like I wasn't slacking off trying to move anything. So there's quite a few different videos along the way. There was one in the rehab hospital after Newcastle. I was trying to just stand up and extend my leg backwards to get a little bit of glute firing. I've got electrodes on my butt, and I'm
being a personal trainer and having a are pretty good at going through the Chek parts of the Chek program. Do you think that helped you or didn't help you, knowing that like understanding the body a little bit more than the average person?
Oh, it definitely helped me. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had to not judge if a physio or somebody gave me an exercise, I had to not critique it and go, oh, I'm not sure that's.
Yeah.
And I was quite good at handing myself over to the professionals and saying, okay, well, you know, you're dealing with people who are, you know, in this sort of a state. That's not my professional place. But then I had the mentality to work hard. And I distinctly remember in the rehab hospital, I could look at people and you could almost guarantee who was going to succeed and who wasn't, because they weren't used to using their body or feeling it versus someone who was and had some intention and intensity behind what they were doing, even if it was a lift your arm exercise.
Yeah.
You know, or someone they were just present in the rehab and they were looking, what's the next thing? I want to get better.
Yeah.
Versus someone just sitting in a chair waiting to be told to do something. There was just a really black and white sort of criteria you could apply to everybody, really.
Do you think the holistic lifestyle coaching and the understanding of the other side of movement, so not just the physical, but the metaphysical and and like we talked about, having that a faith and a sole purpose also would have helped you through that process?
Yeah, I think I just didn't have many doubts.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I was trying not to doubt or, yeah, I was just in a good place to get better. And that was everything from the nutritional side to the psychological side to the purpose. I mean, I had the kids coming to visit me. You know, it's pretty motivating when you got your 1-year-old coming in, giving you a big hug.
Yeah. How do you think that, or do you think that changed you as a coach and a trainer?
Yes. Yeah, it has.
In what way?
I'd say probably, I mean, you're familiar with the Chek approach, that sort of, we have this sort of starting point where you're building flexibility and stability and strength. You've got this sort of, you know,
Timeline?
Yeah, sort of, you know where you're heading with something. You start at the start and then you move there. You know, you move along to the power of performance and all the fun things that are cool. So it was the first time that I'd ever started at the start. Like right. I couldn't get in a wheelchair. I was that bad.
Yeah.
And so I had to live every moment of it, of that whole model, front to back. And I'm still halfway through it. You know, I'm not through it yet. But in terms of the other thing, in terms of coaching clients, I'm definitely more empathetic, obviously, because I've felt a lot more. But I also I realize you've got to do the work. If you want to get better from something or improve at something or, you know, whatever it is, you can't just sit there and hope it happens. I think that's definitely, I'm more encouraging of people now, empathetically, but come on, you've got to help yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
and having a reason to do it, or finding a reason to do it, not just coming into a gym and saying I want to lose weight, but really I think maybe digging deeper to why they want in the first place. Yeah,
definitely. And you can see in the people who've got that purpose, they've got the reason to do it. You know, that's definitely a factor too.
Have you had more rehab clients or more clients with higher level needs than you did before, do you think?
Yeah, a couple. Definitely a couple. I think there was a podcast I did 18 months or so ago, and then, you know, just things that are on social media. So people will say, oh, you should go and see that Chris Jones fella because he's back walking and he was in a mess. Yeah. So there've been a handful of that type of client, which isn't really my passion, really. I mean, it kind of is now because, you know, you can help somebody. But in terms of my career passion, I love sport and movement and, you know, a little bit further down the track.
Yeah.
Not quite so clinical.
Yeah.
But yeah, there've been a few more.
Whereabouts are you now in your recovery? Because you just said you're only halfway there.
I'm still with a couple of the movement patterns, really working on stability. Mm-hmm. So pretty much, you know, where the pelvis is involved. So I can deadlift,
Yeah.
Because I've got a nice stable pelvis, but it put me in a lunge pattern, and it's not quite so pretty. Gait pattern and lunge would definitely be the two that I'm working on the most. But I mean, I can push and pull in stable environments. If my lower body's required to stabilize me, it's not so good.
Yeah.
But I was pretty dedicated to the process of rehabilitation. So about a year or so ago, I tried to change it up to, I did more things that I would enjoy.
Right.
As opposed to just doing reps and sets of, inanely boring tonic.
Yeah.
So for example, once I've got my wood chop to a reasonable level,
yeah.
I started playing tennis with Nikki and a friend. So I would get some lateral movement out of that, and which I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And I would just stand on the baseline trying to bash it as hard as I could and move as well as I could and just have the best time.
Similar to a woodshop pattern, but taking it into an environment that challenged you a little bit more and stimulated the nervous system, I think, a bit more.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And without thinking, I'd be pushing myself just to get to a ball, or, being a bit off balance and having to recover. Yeah, just to that sporty level that for me was definitely part of a sole purpose, an active, fun, sporty kind of outlook, lifestyle.
How much further do you think you've got to go, and how long do you think it'll take you to get there? Looking at how far you've come already.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, I guess, isn't it? Do
you still have pins in the pelvis? Like, what's holding the pelvis together right now?
So right now there's one pin that literally goes right across through the whole thing, like a chicken skewer.
Yep.
And then there's one that goes about halfway. So they're the two bits. Oh, and also there's a sheet of metal, or something about that big, across the front with about 6 or 9 screws through at all different funny angles holding it together. But they're staying in now. Right. They don't come out. So I think the pelvis is really good, and it'll get stronger. And it's just the process and going through it. The tricky bit is the nerve damage going through into the left foot. So I still have paresthesis through the left foot. Perineals aren't too good. My toe extensors aren't very good. So if I can keep working on that, which I intend to, I think that'll make a big difference in my gait pattern, which is such a fundamental one for playing with the kids and running around and bushwalking and things. So yeah, I think the nerve damage, it's coming up to 3 years. The progress has definitely slowed. I'm not limiting myself to what some people say is you've got a 2-year window and that's it. That doesn't exist in my mind. So I still take joy in the tiniest little wins. So what did I do last week? I think I stood on my left leg for about 10 seconds.
That's awesome.
And I was like, you beauty. Because a year ago I couldn't stand it for any seconds.
Yeah.
So there might be something else that I do, and I just think, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. And which I did all through, especially the early days of the rehab, find any reason to pat myself on the back and say, well done, I'm moving forward.
Attitude is massive, and you've got a great attitude, Chris.
I'm still improving, that's for sure.
With that nerve damage, have you tried anything other than the conventional?
Yes, what have I been doing recently? Blood flow restriction training has been my new thing the last month or two. Dr. McCall is all over that. He's right into that.
I haven't heard anything about that.
So that's where you sort of apply a tourniquet of type to affect the metabolic conditions in the muscle. So basically, you do it tight enough that you can't get venous outflow, and the metabolites build up in the muscle tissue. Yeah. So it kind of tricks the body without having to do heavy, hard work into thinking you've done a lot of strength training.
Yeah.
And the more I've researched it, actually, the more valid I see it, particularly for other populations, for age populations. So I can't move my calf very well on my left foot, but I can trick my body into thinking that I've done a big calf workout day. And the more I research it, the the mechanical stress and the metabolic stress are both really important. It's not just the mechanical stress of a calf raise.
So the metabolic stress would be the reaction that the body has to sending the repair tissue and fluids to that area after the fact?
Yeah, that's right. The buildup of lactate, and then, you know, growth hormone responses. And there's a whole cascade of things below that. But it's really useful. I mean, the bodybuilders have been doing it for years, which I was a bit resistant getting into it, but it's really... So that's been one. I do red light therapy.
Yeah.
Which I find really good for inflammation on my foot, because standing up all day in the gym's really not that friendly on my foot. So it doesn't really swell, it just hurts. Yeah. So that's very soothing. I've been looking into hyperbaric chambers recently. Mm-hmm. I've just got to convince one of the big hospitals to let me in, which I'm working on. So they use that already? What's that, sorry?
They use that already?
I haven't, no, but that's one I'm researching at the moment.
Use them?
Sorry, I keep breaking back.
The hospitals use the hyperbaric chambers?
The only one I know at the moment is the Prince of Wales Hospital in Sydney, in Randwick. Yeah. There's lots of, it's coming as a bit of an alternative therapy set where you can go and have hyperbaric chamber sessions, but they only go up to a certain, or effectively down to a certain depth of pressure, and then which is good for sort of football players with concussion and wound healing and that sort of thing. But for the level of nerve healing that I want, I've got to go to a deeper, more specific chamber, sort of place you'd go for the bends if you're a scuba diver. Came up too quickly.
That's really interesting. Have you thought about free diving then?
Yes, I've done a fair bit of free diving in the past. But yeah, I think you've got to go fairly deep. Yeah. I think you probably, I don't know, 30 to 60 meters type of depth, I think.
Hyperbaric chamber would just, need to do that.
Yeah, they measure it in atoms, and I think you've got to go down to about 2 atoms to get there. But then I've got to sort of have the conversation with the hospital, who might not be looking at through the same eyes and research as me. So I've got to crack the system.
So have you got a contact there that you've been talking to, or you're yet to do that?
I did have one contact, which sort of didn't go anywhere. So I've now got to start knocking on a different door. Yeah. That's a work in progress.
Why do you think this happened? Do you think it happened to you, or do you think it happened for you, or have you not got that far in your therapy yet?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm there with that fully. I've heard people say, from other serious accidents. And one thing that, I have learned is these type of accidents, not necessarily true, but these major accidents do happen. And that doesn't happen to me. No way. But I've heard people say, oh yeah, not the best thing that ever happened to me, but if I had my time again, I'd happily accept the accident, and it's been the best change of my life and all that sort of thing. I definitely am not at that point yet. Yeah. Whether I will or not, and why did it happen? I don't know. I've got a little part of me that says it'll be revealed at some point, but I haven't really chased finding out. I haven't had that moment yet. Yeah. So that'll be quite interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty deep, that one, isn't
it? Yeah, I mean, and for a long time, I've just been in this sort of survival, get back to basics kind of model, do what you've got to do as a dad, recover as much as you can, and almost stage 1. I don't know what stage that is, but I don't think it's stage 1.
I think you're doing a marvelous job, Chris. I really do. I don't know that I've got any more questions. I'm just going to go over my list really quickly. Where are you? Over here. What do you hope to teach your children? And this is completely probably off, well, not off, but might coincide with what we've just been talking about. And this will probably be my last question for you. But in terms of legacy, because we mentioned that before, what do you hope to teach, or what do you hope your children remember you for? A very big question.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think I'm sure you're the same with this, that the focus we've got on health and healthy lifestyle, you know, the goodness in life for us is, we're pretty keen parents on, you know, helping our kids respect others, respect the earth and the environment, you know, their own bodies. That's a big thing. I guess in terms of the legacy, something I learned, it wasn't intentionally put on me by my parents, but I mean, ultimately it came through, was I was in a fairly narrow box of what I would consider myself, where I was going to go in life and what I was going to do and the options. So I think if we can impress on our kids that they can do whatever the hell they want, and they're going to, you know, that kind of broad-mindedness and openness, I think is something that, you know, that I'd see the next generation building on what I've learned.
Yeah.
One of the most wonderful things I remember when I first came to Australia was that everybody was mixing in different professions. So we used to come back forward to the city from, you know, Sydney on the ferry.
Yeah.
And often people would have a beer and things, and you'd have this stockbroker talking to the carpenter, you know, and someone in $1,000 suit standing next to somebody in a pair of thongs and a ripped t-shirt. And it didn't matter. And that was a huge revelation, because that class society in Britain was something that it was just how I sort of grew up.
Do you think that's why your scope of what you said was narrow of what you would consider doing as a job? Like, do you think
I think I think that was part of it.
Yeah.
You know, my dad used to go for a beer with his friends every so often, and they were all white collar guys, all professionals. There weren't other trades in there, or, you know, different people from different walks of life. Yeah. So that's something I absolutely love about Australia, and the respect you get in different things. You know, whether you're a carpenter or a lawyer or whoever.
I think we take too much for granted here in Australia, because we do have a pretty lucky country, and in comparison, we are pretty broad-minded and pretty accepting of most people.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something that I'm really happy that my kids are growing up and around, and they've got the freedom to follow their own path.
Dreams and passion.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being with me today, Chris. It's been wonderful.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me, Tanya.
You're welcome.